when you're in pain, soothing as a springtime rain, to have a friend right in your corner, your heart will feel a little warmer. Tender loving care, tender loving care, each warm and friendly touch lets someone know you care so much. Tender loving care, tender loving care.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Greenbrier Almond, and thank you for joining us on our program, Tender Loving Care. Each year, for 37 years, we've been talking about certain issues as the month would come up or as the topic would come up year by year. One of them is child abuse. And April each year is Child Abuse Prevention Month. And of course, every day we should be preventing child abuse. Horrible, horrible blight on our society. But I'm happy that for the 37 years in my medical career, that I can talk about this and share some of my concerns and society's concerns about how we're treating children. And I want to give a couple numbers in case people are listening to this and they feel that there is a child who's being abused. I'll probably give this once or twice so people can report something if they realize that there's suspicion of child abuse. It doesn't have to be proven in their mind, but it can be investigated, and sometimes this will save the life of a child. First of all, we have the West Virginia State Police, 473-4200. You can also get these numbers, I'm sure, off the web, and you can get it off in the phone book. So the State Police number, 473-4200. In Upshur County, where this is mostly broadcast, the Sheriff's Department would also receive information, 472-1180. And then here in Buchanan, where we're being filmed, the City Police number is 472-5723. Any of these, there are emergency hotlines and other numbers available, but it's an important topic, and I would be amiss, I think, if I didn't at least alert you. If you think that, if you're watching as a child and you didn't realize you were being abused, but now you realize because of this program, there's help. You can call these numbers. You can go to your minister, you can go to a teacher at school, or a nurse at school, and tell someone about this. But let me talk a little bit about this and how we can prevent child abuse and what is it, some of the definitions, what we see right here in Upshur County. At this time, I would serve on the school board. And of course, we have issues in the school system where child abuse becomes evident. So the behavioral indicators that we see in the school system include unusual school attendance. Truancy. You're allowed to have so many missed days unexcused, and after that, you're truant. You have to have a doctor's excuse. You have to have reasons why you're not in school. And they've shortened the days, and I'm not even sure I should know, but I should. It's about 5 days, but you could check the current law. They've shortened those days, but we don't want children to be absent without reason. And but if a child starts to be truant, that could be a signal of abuse, or at least something else is happening to the child that needs investigated. And we've learned not to let it go for very many days. It's not enough for a parent to keep saying, oh yeah, they're clumsy, they couldn't come to school. They could have bruises, you see, or other harm, and the parent is hiding that from authorities by keeping the child away from school. If there's chronic absenteeism, that means over 6 months, and there's always missing Monday, for example, then that would be a point of finger, at least at something that could be looked at. So absenteeism from school, or getting out early, coming late, tardy, and so forth. chronic hunger, tiredness, lethargy. Thank goodness that I saw this in the newspaper just the other day. Rock Cave School over in Rock Cave has been given an award. The Southern Upshur County business community has recognized them as the leading institution in their community, and Rock Cave School is doing a great job. And it was pointed out in the article that some 36 children this year are getting, on long weekends and many weekends, a knapsack with food, so the child never has to be hungry. And there were cases where, for one reason or another, the child was being hungry on long weekends. And certainly chronic hunger, tiredness, or lethargy can point. That doesn't mean it is abuse, but it can point in that direction. There's neglect. There are all sorts of other reasons why something like this could happen. Some children are begging or collecting leftovers, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if they were coming around to a restaurant all the time, or if you were operating a restaurant, they realized there was a child hanging around looking for food scraps, then that might point toward abuse. Assuming adult responsibilities is good for children to have chores. I grew up with chores. I think my parents did me a favor. Many children don't have chores, and that's a problem for them. But if they have a lot of adult responsibilities, if the way families have deteriorated in Upshur County and other places, there are children being raised by grandparents, and the grandparents, of course, may be feeble, and the parents, where are they? We don't know. Maybe they're working, maybe they're out of state, maybe they've left their family for one reason or another, but it's come back to the grandparents to be there. And so the children are growing up too fast with adult responsibilities, and that can point toward abuse. And in reporting no caretaker at home. Remember when I was working at Rock Cave, and I did this for over 7 years, we would try to locate some caretakers, some family member, an adult person. Say if a child were appearing to be neglected by a teacher, and the teacher reports it to us, and then we as a healthcare provider are trying to investigate. We would have a hard time, I'm going to sneeze here in a minute, but anyway, we have a hard time getting the child checked out. We would send a social worker up this muddy road, and they come to this house, and a parent should be home, a grandparent, someone should be at home, and there's no one home. We go another day, there's no one home. Go another day, there's no one home. 4 or 5 days in a row, no adult is at home. And that would be something that's certainly a red flag that something is happening. The child should have a caretaker at home. I want to come to several other markers here. I'm using the local, and I hats off to the Record Delta, who publishes every year a column and a page announcing some of these criteria that I'm making reference to today about the prevention of child abuse. It's a societal problem. It's a community problem. There's certain things we need to be aware of. I'm going to talk about the behavioral indicators first, and then we'll go to the physical indicators also today. But as a psychiatrist, and certainly all of us, a teacher, a minister, a neighbor, we may see a behavioral indicator before we see a physical indicator. And so it's good to be aware of this. An abused child, of course, could disclose sexual abuse. And that's reportable. All these are reportable. We have a child protection agency, the Department of Health and Human Services here in West Virginia, will investigate any of these charges. So if a child brings this up and it says something is happening, it needs to be investigated. The year I left the VA in 2004 and went to Rock Cave to work, it was over this issue of the number of Child Protective Service investigations in 1 year in Upshur County. And the overlapping area, Upshur, Lewis are together, there were 1,200 cases in 1 year. There are 9,000 children in the two counties. I said, 1 in 7? What does that mean? You know, that's a horrible high number, and indeed it is. And I thought someone had to be helping these children in some way. to write their life, even if something horrible has happened to them. And I tried to do that, and other people are doing it. And it's led me down different roads, but for 7 years it directed my practice of medicine, and now for 5 years on the school board of Upshur County. And there are many directions, other directions we go to. But first is some type of disclosure that something's happening, and that could be investigated. Second is regressive behavior, thumb sucking, bedwetting, fear of the dark. Of course, you can recognize all these are normal childhood behaviors, and there are reasons why something may happen. A parent may be hospitalized, a grandparent may have died, but there's a reason behind regressive behavior, and it needs to be investigated. Parents or teachers, again, are very good at reporting these things to healthcare authorities, and then we follow up as best we can. And the parents are, of course, involved too. And we don't go very far. No one can go very far without at least interviewing a parent, grandparent, whoever is responsible for the child. But regression is a big key. Promiscuous or seductive behavior. Now, children dress differently than they did when I grew up, and so I would say sometimes I would misinterpret a seductive behavior or dress, and it may not be. It may be a style, but certainly, as a Supreme Court justice once said about pornography, when trying to define it, he says, "I don't know how to define it in words, but I know it when I see it." And that's a play on words and a joke, but you can tell sometimes when someone is being a little too seductive, and they're being cute, but they've crossed some line. And I remember one time when I was in my practice in Rock Cave, there was a child, and there was a question about abuse, and as we were leaving the office, the child gave me the biggest hug. And it felt good to me, and I explained it to my social worker, and she said, "Well, that was inappropriate. The child, is disclosing something here." And we went on with our investigation until we found out. But it was an interesting crossing the line in some way, because she didn't know who I was. She was hugging a stranger, more or less, and that was what was inappropriate. Not that she couldn't hug her mother or father or grandmother or grandfather that way, but I was not any of those to her. Disturbed sleep patterns or recurrent nightmares. I've spent most of my 41 years in medicine helping people with psychiatric issues, and including going back to Freud, the interpretation of dreams. And I'm not an analyst and don't interpret dreams greatly, but I have a great interest in people who have nightmares or dreams, or their dream patterns are changing, because they do point the way toward other things happening, other behaviors in their life. So disturbed sleep, nightmares, this can be dangerous. Unusual or age-inappropriate interest in sexual matters. Again, we've sexualized our whole society to some degree, and this is unfortunate because once a childhood is over, it's over, and we're adults for a long time, aren't we? I mean, if we look at the obituaries in Upshur County, there are many people living into their 80s, and it seems to be a healthy place to live. But what if you grew up too fast? Instead of being 20, when you had your first sexual experience, what if you're 12 or 8 or something? Then you've lost childhood, and the childhood is already too short. So this early sexualization is a problem in our society in general, but certainly it can point to child abuse. Another one is avoidance of undressing or wearing extra layers of clothing. So sometimes children are extra cautious of what they're wearing. And I remember when I was taking my gym class in 9th grade and 10th grade, there were children who would not undress in front of the rest of us. It was a little embarrassing to be in a locker room and undress and dress, but you could be modest about it at the same time. But there were some children who just absolutely refused that. And I was young myself. I didn't understand, nor did I need to understand their reasons why they didn't do that. But it does make the list of concerns that might point an adult toward checking on child abuse. If there's a sudden, I seem to have an allergy today, so sorry about that. But there's a sudden decline in school performance or truancy. That's a big one, because often, again, the schools are seeing the change early, and they were the ones reporting the behavior, and that leads to an investigation. So if a child's going right along making A's and B's, and suddenly they're making D's and F's, then something is wrong, and that needs investigated. Or truancy, missing too many days unexcused. I believe it's about 5 in our society, but in our school system now, but it's very few days can be unexcused. And then difficulty in walking or sitting. So you can imagine if a child has been abused in one way or another, and they're not agile as children are. We have our greatest agility until we're age 12. I mean, little children, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, can do amazing things with their body, but what if they have multiple broken bones? What if they've been abused, bruised, and hurt in various ways? Then they may not be able to sit still or walk or carry on in a normal way. So all those things are important. There are emotional abuse and physical indicators, and I want to talk a little bit about those too. Sometimes we have eating disorders, both anorexia and obesity. I spent 2 years of my life working with young people who have anorexia. This was why I was teaching at Oral Roberts University School of Medicine. Fascinating area of medicine. And we have in West Virginia the other problem. We are one of the heaviest states in America. Mississippi may be heavier than us, but anyway, we have obesity is a problem in our society in West Virginia. And they do, either one of those can point toward abuse. And as adults, West Virginians will report that 25% of them have been abused. You ask children in a class today, say 100 children at a school, you'll not find 25 that you can figure out that have been abused or neglected, but you know in a long-term way that is the case. So the change in eating habits can point the way toward an abuse, either the obesity or the anorexia. Speech disorders, stuttering and stammering. I'm always amazed. Most of my career has been with the VA, with veterans, and I will have any number of soldiers tell me that after their war stress began, they were in combat, then they were stammering or stuttering for the first time in their life. Of course, I remember a few children growing up who stammered and stuttered, and I don't know their case history, whether they were abused or not, but if we were around a child and you were around a child, you recognize that they spoke normally for a long period of time, they started stammering and stuttering, it's a red flag that something could be wrong. There's developmental delays in acquisition of speech or motor skills. This can point to an abuse. We had a wonderful experience in Buchanan about 1980 when I was first coming to town. We had adopted as a community a family from Cambodia. And the young boy had just learned to speak in Khmer. And he had been in a refugee camp with the United Nations. And then, of course, he came to America. And then he heard no more Khmer, heard all this English. And he lost his speech for a while, and then he gained it back. And I think he ended up being able to speak both, which is very good for him. But a change in speech pattern like that can go back to abuse or neglect. And then there's weight or height level substantially below normal. We have physical growth is how we measure health. And there are children who are physically short, underweight, and this could be the family not feeding them or other ways they're being neglected at home. even children who are not hugged, and we need to hug daily, if you will. I like those bumper stickers, hugs, not drugs. So we're encouraged, of course, with the family to hug our children and to show warmth to them. But children who are not physically handled are stunted in their growth. And there are actually babies who have been just put in a crib and never attended to in a loving manner, and they have failure to thrive. And it's something pediatricians recognize, and when they get into a hospital or nursery or someone cares for them, they're thriving and growing very rapidly. A flat or a bald spot on the head in an infant also can be obviously a child who's neglected or put in a crib or setting and they're never moved, and what if they get a flat spot on their head or they lose their hair in one place, and that can be a physical sign. And then nervous disorders, rashes, hives, facial tics, stomach aches. Things like that point the way toward some type of an abuse situation, a physical sign. Now, these are all general signs, and each time they occur, it does not mean that there's abuse, nor should we be accusing parents of abuse. I remember one time, I think we were a very fine family, and I've asked them over the years how their daughter's doing and how she turned out, and I think has become a professional, is doing very well. But anyway, they came to my attention because they were being accused of abusing their child in some way based upon a physical sign of the child having asthma. Of course, there are a lot of reasons for asthma, including allergies. And I think as a child, I had some asthma, and certainly I have seasonal allergies. But but to say that does not mean that I was an abused child. And in this case, this little girl was not abused. But the accusation came down and needed investigation because she had developed asthma. Other signs and symptoms that we want to talk about that sometimes are covered over by absences from school are various bruises or multiple broken bones, or bones in various stages of healing, or any sign of major physical abuse. Burns on the skin, like a cigarette burn, things like that are almost impossible, except in the case of an abuse. And these are often, of course, kept from the public by a parent or an adult who realizes they would be in trouble if it was present. If there's some lesion on the palm or a sole of the foot or the abdomen or the buttocks that is unexplained, then this also points the way. When I was taking a class at WVU in child abuse, and I took an extra month in my pediatric rotation to study that. I was interested in it, and there was a Dr. Ruth Phillips, and she was a very fine pediatrician, and so she took me on house calls with her to the homes of children who had been abused, or there was a suspicion of abuse. Anyway, I was in one home, and the little boy was sitting beside me, and Dr. Phillips was talking to the parents, and we were going through the investigation, and the child showed me a hand with puncture wounds in the hand, and so I was interested in looking at the hand, and I realized that was part of the abuse pattern, and then the child asked me to put my hand out, which I did, and he took a pencil and jabbed me and punctured my skin. And I was shocked, but he was playing, in a sense, aggressively, acting out what he had experienced himself, which was a horrible experience for me. I know it was a child was putting up with that all the time. I have never forgotten it, but I never wanted to go back and have a pencil jabbed into my arm or my hand. There's also a stocking and glove pattern that we see sometimes with skin lesions. Obviously, say if it's a foot that's burned up to the point, and then there's a circle there, that's not an infectious disease process. That would come up the leg in a uniform way further up the leg. It wouldn't just stop right at the stocking area, and that would point the way towards some type of an abuse, maybe in a burn pattern or a freeze pattern or something of that nature. There's donut-shaped holes on the buttocks or genital areas. Those can be due to, again, burns or various ways that the child's skin is being abused. Rope burns. Some children are lashed with ropes. We all have, and I suspect older people like myself have all had our moments where we were switched. My mother would have me go cut my own switch, and my wife and I have talked about it. She was in her home not advised, or after a while she knew not to ask for one switching. She'd ask for 2 or 3. The mother or father would ask, well, what is this, problem that you've done, whatever it is, tie the cat's tail together and put them up on top of the wire, the clothesline or something like that, whatever the child has done, what is that worth as a switching? And she would learn to ask for 2 or 3. But anyway, those switches are one thing, but rope burns would be something else. Infected burns and various stages of healing, and then the shape of common utensils like appliances. I mentioned the pencil wound, things of that nature. Well, there's much we could talk about here about child abuse. We're going into National Child Prevention Month. April will be a focus. I think there's always a ceremony on the courthouse steps where we remember children who even have died in our own community because of abuse and neglect. And certainly we're reminded this month to love our children, care for our children, and make sure that they're not abused or neglected. Well, thank you for joining us on our program, Tender Loving Care. Special thanks to Channel 3 for this opportunity to come your way each week. Look forward to more discussions like this of Tender Loving Care.
Stories of a West Virginia Doctor, written by Dr. Harold D. Allman. A collection of 55 short stories about his experience as a small-town doctor in central West Virginia. And Tender Loving Care. Stories from a West Virginia Doctor, Volume 2, written by Dr. Greenbrier Allman, using videotapes to write 70 additional stories of his father's very colorful life as a small-town doctor. They can be found for purchase at Amazon.com and most local bookstores. Tune into Channel 3 Buckhannon for Tender Loving Care with Dr. Greenbrier Allman, where he talks about the connection between Christianity and medicine.